dominance, and then we'll see, because they will do to us what we've done to them, but tenfold. This inherently is a reactionary ideology, one only born out of being comfortable in the position of global dominance. Okay. Watch the second part of it. I almost want to watch just like the foundation of like German paramilitaries, because it's very important. I mean, this establishes the basis of like how there's a reactionary heel turn from social democrats that inevitably sick their sights on what they consider to be much more threatening to the comfortable positions that they've created for themselves. The reason why I always stress this, like whenever people come in here and chirp about like the conditions that made way for Nazi Germany's rise, it is objectively ahistorical when people claim, like when people see the KPD and the German socialist movement and put the blame on them, liberals who choose to put the blame on the German socialist movement. The left got too woke for me, which is why I no longer believe in like climate change. And actually personally think that like, you know, I've decided I am a Nazi now.
Welcome back, and thank you for the amazing feedback on part 1, which you should check out if you want to fully understand the historical context of the betrayal of the German Revolution, since we look at the development of the important political forces, their representatives, and how those relate to the development of capitalism. So in case you are confused about some names that I use here, you'll likely find an introduction of those organizations or personalities in the first part. So, los geht's. After the refusal of the sailors to be sent to their certain death by the high command of the German Reich, the key...
Dude, if this guy fucking complains about the existence of the Marxist-Leninist vanguard, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. Read more Lenin. He is not clear on it, on why he says it's necessary. Can you please explain why Lenin was a tyranny of the few, i.e. vanguard tyranny, please? Yes, dude, vanguard tyranny. Violence sometimes is a necessity to overthrow, and it was a necessity to overthrow the Tsar. Okay, that's it. There is no political system. There is no political system that does not have violence in it, whether it's structural violence or direct violence or state violence. Okay, I don't understand. I don't understand how you think that hugs and kisses are going to magically cause any kind of monarchy to perish. What is that chatter pro czar? No, he's probably fucking an infantile, disordered left com. That's it. That's what it is, most likely. No, just like no disrespect to the Netzerei Karta, but just like the Messiah is going to magically give the Jews a nation state, he's going to come back, and capitalism is going to succumb to its own fucking... All the left-com groups are pro-Lenin. Okay. He's an anarchist. I don't know. I don't know what he is.
The uprising began on November 3rd, 1918.
He's an anarcho-syndicalist. I don't know. I don't know what he is.
It was the beginning of the end for the German monarchy. But there was something bigger at play here. It was the very stability of German capitalism. By now, the revolting workers and soldiers understood very well who they were sent to death for. According to a report that was sent to the naval headquarters, the sailors were singing, quote, "We struggle not for Germany's honor. We struggle only for millionaires." They were saluting another with, "Long live Liebknecht." All attempts to suppress the Kiel uprising failed. The sailors disarmed their officers, armed themselves and raised the red flag on the ships and factories, freed their comrades from prison and occupied public buildings. Mass meetings composed of tens of thousands of people were held and sailors and workers' councils were formed, just like they had formed before the October Revolution in Russia. On November 4th, Kiel belonged to the councils. An increasing number of soldiers and workers showed their solidarity and joined, with many sailors leaving Kiel and carrying the uprising to all parts of the country. Virtually every town in Germany followed a similar pattern like the one in Kiel. The councils became the authority in the towns. In Hamburg, the biggest city in the north, a workers' and soldiers' council formed, and Paul Fröhlich of the International Communists of Germany led a group of armed soldiers to take over the daily paper Hamburger Echo to create an outlet for the council named Rote Fahne, Red Flag in English, which proclaimed, quote, "This is the beginning of the German Revolution, of the World Revolution. Hail the most powerful action of the World Revolution. Long live socialism. Long live the German Workers' Republic. Long live World Bolshevism." Within a few days, all major cities of the German Reich were under the control of revolutionary workers and soldiers' councils. It is really quite incredible how, within a short time, a revolutionary situation can unfold this quickly all over a country, shattering all the theories of many self-proclaimed Marxists about the seeming stability of capitalism and their shifting the question of revolution far into an indefinite future. Quote, "There are decades where nothing happens, and there are weeks where decades happen," Lenin said in 1917. Even in conservative Bavaria, soldiers joined with the workers to occupy all strategic points, such as railroads, telephone offices, or government agencies. On November 8th, the People's Republic of Bavaria was formed, thus ending the Bismarckian system. For a long time, bourgeois historians refused to call this immense upheaval a revolution. They referred to it as a chaotic period, a period of disorder and mutiny. But what had happened was, in fact, a real revolution. The very fabric of the social and economic system was shattered and replaced with something else. The masses embraced the councils over monarchic and bourgeois institutions. What are those councils exactly, and why are they so important for workers' power? Karl Marx had written about them in his analysis of the Paris Commune. Quote, "The Commune was formed of the municipal councillors, chosen by universal suffrage in the various wards of the town, responsible and revocable at short terms. The majority of its members were naturally working men, or acknowledged representatives of the working class. The Commune was to be a working, not a parliamentary body, executive and legislative at the same time. The councils were a more democratic alternative, not only to monarchy, but also to the parliamentary system. In contrast to bourgeois democracy, in which all economic power is in the hands of a small minority of capitalists, the councils were precisely an organ for democratic control of the economy by the workers themselves. They enabled millions of people to achieve an unprecedented degree of self-determination over their lives. Meanwhile, the Social Democrats were doing their best to ward off the revolution by pushing the Kaiser to abdicate. Friedrich Ebert told Prince Max, quote, "Unless the Kaiser abdicates, a revolution is inevitable. But I will have none of it. I hate it like sin." The revolution could no longer be defeated. It had to be stifled. But time was running out. People's power was being established everywhere. But the most important city had not fallen yet. In Berlin, the independent Social Democrats were arguing with the Spartakists and the revolutionary shop stewards about how to unleash the revolution in the most crucial city. The revolutionary left was in favor of a mass strike, but the meeting turned it down, chiefly by USPD leader Hugo Haase, who still believed in unity with the SPD. He smeared the Kiel uprising as an impulsive explosion. Berlin was the most crucial city because it was here where state repression was strongest. The police crushed a meeting to celebrate the anniversary of the Russian Revolution on November 7th and gained control of all important streets and public buildings. But Karl Liebknecht had...
I'm not even chewing my nails right now. Shut the fuck up. I'm using a toothpick. Jesus Christ, y'all are so fucking annoying. I will chew my nails as much as I want. Suck my dick.
Enough of the waiting and discussing with the cowardly USPD leaders and issued a leaflet calling for revolution. He was supported by the revolutionary shop stewards, the Spartakists, and many USPD members, frustrated with the appeasement of...
Wait, we interrupt this broadcast because there's a new Abu Ubaidah statement released. Apparently, Hamas actually captured more IDF soldiers. Do you have You have a link? I want to see it. Hamas is claiming that a significant ambush against the IDF in the tunnels under the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza involved the killing of IDF soldiers and seizing their gear, and also the capture of at least one Israeli soldier. I can't show you the video, obviously, because it's very fucking graphic. I can't tell if he's alive and is the Israeli soldier that they captured, or if it's one of the dead Israeli soldiers, but they're dragging a dude inside of a tunnel system, it seems. I can't say I have much sympathy for the IDF. No, I don't have any sympathy for the IDF. I'm simply relaying what they're saying they did. Isn't that a war crime? Wait, what? You think it's a war crime to capture an enemy combatant? What the fuck? No, it's literally, it's not. That's like, that unironically, that unironically is one of the things that is like totally permissible. The treatment of the prisoner can be a war crime depending on what you do with the prisoner, but taking a prisoner of war is not a... He's dead, isn't he? No, I think the person that they're dragging is alive. I just can't tell from the... I can't tell from the video if this is like the actual prisoner or if it's a dead person that they're dragging. Hamas and Israel both, however, do this thing where they will retrieve dead bodies as well. Both sides participate in this, and I don't know if that falls under desecration. I think it probably does. Where they will capture dead bodies as well and use them as a bargaining chip as well. I'm pretty sure that would be... I'm certain that would fall under... that definitely falls under a war crime. It would constitute for desecration of a dead soldier. Concerned your chat is weirdly happy about taking a prisoner. I mean, it's a prisoner of war, and regardless of Hamas's domestic politics or anything like that, or fundamentalism or anything that they believe in, they are currently engaging in a defensive war against a genocidal state that is engaging in an offensive ethnic cleansing campaign. Capturing a soldier or killing a soldier in that regard is perfectly permissible and just, and literally is a better alternative to killing them, as a matter of fact. Prisoners of war have long often been considered a better means of dealing with conflict than actually killing prisoners, or rather killing soldiers when they're in the act of war, because that is a quicker way to draw the end of the conflict. It's also a massive propaganda blow to what Israel has been trying to cultivate. Israel has been trying to claim that they have done a phenomenal job dealing with Hamas. Israel has been trying to claim that they have dealt with Hamas in the north, dealt with Hamas in the south. The only place where Hamas remains is actually simply Rafah. I just think we all know the IDF soldiers are going to get tortured. I wouldn't be so sure about that. However, yes, under detainment, every single Palestinian gets tortured in some way, shape, or form. But as far as we understand, every single hostage that has been taken, to the best of the ability of the resistance groups, have been defended, literally including putting their own, like Hamas, Al-Qassam Brigade bodies above piles of mattresses in intense bombing campaigns in an effort to save the lives of the hostages. Remember, the rational choice in this circumstance is obviously to make sure that your bargaining chip doesn't perish. This is not to say that they value human life above all else or anything like that. If you do your very best, like if you literally put your life on the line specifically to take hostages, it would make no sense to, kill them. It would make no sense to actually deny them medical care. It is your only form of leverage. Prisoners of war also is the same. Abu Ubaidah just finished a speech saying at noon of Saturday they managed to ambush an IDF platoon north of Gaza in a tunnel, capturing and injuring the entire platoon. I doubt that they took over an entire platoon. I don't know. I don't know what happened. But the IDF is denying the abduction of the soldier. Says Volodymyr Zelensky. You might want to mention the Hamas on the mattresses thing came from a hostage testimony, so you can debunk clip chimps in real time. Yes, the Al-Qassam Brigade soldiers putting their bodies on top of mattresses in periods of intense IDF bombing is not something that Hamas claims. It's something that came directly from a hostage testimony, a hostage that was released that talked about the conditions as they were held hostage by Hamas. Anyway, in any case, taking a prisoner of war during an ethnic cleansing campaign the Al-Qassam brigades are engaging in defensive posture against an ethnic cleansing campaign is going to lead to a lot of political complications in Israel, which is precisely the reason why I suspect the Israeli government would immediately deny it. Because it's a massive blow to the confidence of the colonial entity in this regard. It is a massive blow to the public, to the collective conscience of Israelis that have only heard that the war efforts are, albeit a little tumultuous, still going pretty well. They're defeating Hamas left and right, rarely ever showcasing the atrocities on the ground in Gaza, while simultaneously taking ownership over the death toll, only to say that they have killed thousands, tens of thousands of Palestinian terrorists. Okay? It is humiliating. Al Jazeera Arabic claims multiple soldiers were taken captive in Jabalia ambush. Once again, we do not know the exact details yet. And we perhaps will not know the exact details for some time. Okay? It is going to take some time. Hasan, I find you so odd, though. Like, why say it like that? Say it like what?
Approach of its leadership. The military high command were confident that any uprising in Berlin could be broken up by troops. But that confidence was short-lived, as more and more soldiers joined the revolting crowds carrying red flags. Liebknecht led a group of soldiers to seize the Imperial Palace, and left Independent Emil Eichhorn seized the police headquarters. On November 9th, 6 days after Kiel, the revolution had overtaken Berlin. The old ruling class was desperate, so Prince Max finally handed the chancellor position to Friedrich Ebert on November 9th. The SPD leadership tried its very best to show fake support to the uprising to slowly but surely suffocate it. For instance, their paper Vorwärts called for a general strike, 5 hours after it had already begun. Philipp Scheidemann was eating a meal in the Reichstag restaurant when deputies ran toward him, begging him to calm down the masses who were outside the Reichstag building. He also apparently learned that a few meters away, Liebknecht intended to proclaim a German Soviet Republic. He had to do something quickly to not hand the initiative to the revolutionaries. After he reluctantly went to the balcony, he looked at an angry crowd carrying rifles and red flags. He told them that the socialist Friedrich Ebert is now the chancellor, that socialism had won. But the crowd was still angry, so fearing that the Kaiser's abdication wasn't enough to calm the masses, he proclaimed, quote, "Long live the German Republic," and massive applause followed. Ebert wasn't happy at all with this move, yelling at him, quote, "You have no right to proclaim the Republic." Ebert didn't want the Republic, he wanted order, and he hoped for the monarchy to stay, even after Prince Max gave it up by abdicating. However, little would he know that Scheidemann had been just in time. A few meters away, on the same November 9th, Karl Liebknecht, speaking at a rally in front of the Russian embassy, proclaimed the Republic himself. Quote, "Down with the Hohenzollerns, long live the Social Republic of Germany. The day of liberty has dawned. I proclaim the Free Socialist Republic of all Germans. We extend our hand to them and ask them to complete the world revolution. Those of you who want the world revolution, raise your hands." And thousands of hands rose up. If the German Revolution's most prominent names are Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, the counter-revolution bears the name of Friedrich Ebert and Gustav Noske. Gustav Noske was a party functionary that had become a prominent deputy, an enemy of proletarian internationalism. He had declared at the Reichstag during World War II that socialists were not, quote, "vagabonds without a fatherland." He had tried to convince the bourgeois parties to give the German workers good reasons to become soldiers and thus give their lives in the imperialist slaughter. Noske declared himself a supporter of Oswald Spengler's proto.
This is also part of the reason why I personally, as someone living in the United States of America, am very, very skeptical of those who unconditionally ride for American imperialism while masquerading as socialists themselves or as radical, progressive figures themselves, even if they don't use the term socialism. Okay? I do not take issue with people who categorize themselves as social democrats in general. Okay? But I do draw a red line when someone claims that they are pro-NATO and pro-American empire. Out of what? Out of fear that if America is not engaging in global dominance, then a much scarier foreign country will take America's place and engage in global dominance. And then we'll see, because they will do to us what we've done to them, but tenfold. This inherently is a reactionary ideology, one only born out of being comfortable in the position of global dominance. Okay? When you personally recognize that America is the hegemonic superpower and you simultaneously like that position and claim that that is simply better, albeit marginally, but simply better than the possibility of some other scary country dominating the globe in the way that the United States of America dominates the globe, all of a sudden you arrive at exactly this level, at exactly this kind of ideology. And before people say you are pro-NATO and pro-State Department regarding Ukraine, bro, you have demonstrated your inability to comprehend what I am stating in terms of Ukraine. Saying that Ukraine has a worthy cause of emancipation against an invading force does not mean that I am pro-NATO or pro-State Department regarding Ukraine. As a matter of fact, the reasons as to why I criticize the NATO, pro-NATO, and pro-State Department positions has led many, especially in this group of people, to declare me a pro-Russian simp, someone who is pro-Vladimir Putin, or someone who just hates America. The very same counter-revolutionaries, the modern version of the counter-revolutionary groups that we are looking at right now, are the very same people who consistently tell me that I am pro-Russia and I must hate America and I must leave America because I hate America. NATO Andy say you push Z. Z Andy say you are pro-NATO. How the fuck can you be pro-NATO and too pro-Russia at the same time? I am not and never will be pro-NATO. Nor am I pro-American State Department. If I was, I would love Vladimir Putin. I would hug and kiss him because his actions in Ukraine, both violent, were simultaneously a gift to the NATO admirals and the generals and the military-industrial complex. Vladimir Putin is also not a socialist at all. Vladimir Putin is a kleptocrat. He is a dictator who runs a right-wing, capitalist, oligarch kleptocracy. He is in no way, shape, or form a revolutionary figure. His interests in Ukraine are not born out of a revolutionary desire to liberate the Ukrainian working class. You have to be fucking insane to suspect that. Okay? You are one of the most outspoken anti-NATO leftist content creators out there, and have been for many years now. I know. The only aspect of the USSR that Vladimir Putin likes is an unprincipled understanding of the USSR as like a global superpower, maybe even an empire, which it was not, but that doesn't change the equation or the dynamic in the minds of those who are, you know, the Duginists and Putin himself.
Fascist Prussian socialism. Hitler wrote about Noske in 1933, saying he is, quote, an oak among these social democratic plants. When the news of the Kiel uprising reached the imperial government, Prince Max sent a reliable social democrat to calm the revolutionary fervor, and that man was Gustav Noske. Aside from a few politically conscious workers, the majority of the revolting masses were still confused about the various currents and what differentiates them. Another consequence of not constituting the Communist Party at an earlier point. Yes, the majority Social Democrats had supported the war, but now they were seemingly on their side. Maybe they had acknowledged their mistakes. Many striking workers were not socialists, and they did not yet differentiate between the parties calling themselves socialist. Many of them did not believe, or rather did not want to believe, that the SPD leadership was determined to defend the old system. Hence, the councils were not exclusively made up of revolutionary socialists. For instance, German sociologist Max Weber was part of the Workers' Council of Heidelberg, and he was pleasantly surprised that most members there were moderate liberals. Nonetheless, people were radicalizing quickly, and that process had to be reversed. Noske, a cunning and talented politician, eventually managed to sway the people to his side. He was so successful in doing so that the crowds proclaimed him governor of Kiel. Noske promised to meet the most urgent demands of the workers and soldiers of Kiel, such as pardons of mutineers in return for a more calm atmosphere. The next day, Noske called Berlin, saying he, quote, had only one hope, a voluntary return to order under social democratic leadership. Then the rebellion would collapse. Noske slowly but surely restored authority of the former officers and the police, and Prince Max was full of admiration for what Noske had accomplished at Kiel. Quote, the man has done superhuman things. Prince Max later wrote in his memoirs, quote, the fate of Germany depended on Ebert repeating his party comrades' achievement on a large scale, that is, rolling back the movement throughout the country. Appeasement through minor concessions and false promises. This trick was to be successful in undermining countless working-class movements in the coming decades all over the world. At the time, very few anticipated the tragedy that was about to ensue. It is reasonable to assume that not even the ruling classes themselves were confident they could turn things around. In the 7 days after November the 3rd, revolution was a certainty for much of the working class. The German monarchy had collapsed, and there was no parliament with any claim to power. The only organs with any authority were the workers' and soldiers' councils, and the new government in power called itself socialist, so it is no surprise that many regarded the revolution as completed. Unfortunately, it wasn't. For a revolution to be completed, toppling the old order is not enough. Establishing a new one is the other, in many ways, even harder part. But the masses who had managed to take over city after city had no cohesive plan for what to do with that power. The revolution had been largely spontaneous. It had no centralized leadership, but the counter-revolution did. Now, the trick of Noske in Kiel had to be repeated in many other places, and most crucially in Berlin, where the revolutionary movement had arrived on November 9th. Time was running out. As the new chancellor of a non-existing government, Friedrich Ebert planned to, quote, steer the revolution into orderly channels and defend the rule of law from anarchy. But these maneuvers were not enough to defeat the Marxists, because the workers' and soldiers' councils were still the main authority throughout the German Reich. They had to be won over, and so it was crucial for the MSPD to build a coalition with the USPD to form an executive based on the councils. The independents themselves had not full control over the councils, and so it was in the interests of the USPD right wing to form unity with the MSPD. Hugo Haase was especially interested in social democratic unity because power was shifting quickly to the left wing of the independents, led by Georg Ledebour and the Spartakists. The two parties wanted to meet as quickly as possible, but because Haase wasn't in Berlin that day, and because Haase was so crucial for the MSPD, this decisive meeting was postponed to the next day on November 10th.
Hasan, read this. I feel like you sometimes try to reason with unreasonable people, hoping that they will actually make a decent point.
The destiny of the future of Germany was to be determined in this decisive battle on Sunday. The Spartakists and left independents made their own preparations, but when the meeting started, the revolutionaries found themselves in an unexpected situation. On the previous day, the right Social Democrats mobilized their whole party machine to build up their own councils made up of hand-picked leaders. The propaganda they deployed was clever. They exploited the utopian wish of many to see a united socialist leadership. So they had used their massive resources to put out thousands of leaflets calling for unity and demanding, quote, no fratricidal strife. On 5 p.m., 3,000 delegates of the Workers' and Soldiers' Councils, which had been elected on the same day, met in Circus Busch in Berlin.
Our mouse is going to be live soon, by the way, and then I'll dive into Russ with her.
The Social Democrats made sure that the soldiers' delegates, where they had a bigger influence, came early and would be seated at the front rows, and the workers at the back on the balconies. The soldiers, who were not as well versed in politics, were given the notion that anyone who criticized the need for unity would be a wrecker and a saboteur. The procedure was a mess. Anytime someone from the left wing spoke, they were overshadowed by unity slogans. When Ebert spoke, he met the mood by calling for socialist unity. When Liebknecht spoke, the crowd shouted, quote, unity, unity, and even threatened him with their guns. But still, he maintained his stance just like he had done throughout his political life and warned the delegates that the Social Democrats, quote, are going along with the revolution today, but were its enemies the day before yesterday. The counter-revolution is already underway. It is already in action. It is already among us. But this was not enough. The majority got its way by their calls for parity. The calls for parity were unreasonable. The USPD had outnumbered the MSPD in the factories, so in order to elect a fair committee, the independents would have had to be represented by a majority of delegates. But with the calls for parity and with the crowds on their side, they managed to push through an executive composed of 12 soldiers' delegates, majority Social Democrats or people under their influence, and 12 workers' delegates, 6 from the MSPD and 6 from the USPD. A joint, quote, revolutionary government, unquote, was formed on November 10th, composed of 3 members from each of the 2 Social Democratic parties, Ebert, Scheidemann and Landsberg from the MSPD, Haase, Dittmann and Emil Barth from the USPD. The newly formed government was imbued with a revolutionary veneer. The naming inspired
and independent groups like the United Nations, numerous academics that conduct rigorous third-party investigations after the fact that historically... Oh, you mean it's no different than saying North Korean state media? Okay. Yeah, in an effort to say like they're in the wrong, if that's what you mean. But regardless, if North Korean state media was uniquely consistent in times of conflict, then yes, I would be more charitable to their casualty reporting. 2 fun days in a row, you come into Discord with fresh fun ideas, only to then hop on stream, do none of that shit. Wait, what are you talking about? This is exactly what I wanted to do today. Watching like the Betrayal of the German Revolution, like longer videos like this, longer video essays like this is exactly what I wanted to do on a Saturday. That's not a joke. When I said I wanted to like potentially look into red pillars and stuff like that, this is what I meant. I meant like we want to watch maybe I literally said video essays. I want to watch more video essays. I think this is great. It's educational. It's something that I can very quickly turn back to, you know, contemporary political analysis. This is valuetainment, baby.
Revolution, the quote, Council of People's Commissars. It sounded just revolutionary enough, proclaiming Germany a socialist republic and declaring that all power lies with the councils. Of course, this government was everything but revolutionary. The chief aim of Hase and Dittmann, who were chosen from the USPD, was to reunite social democracy, not revolution. Liebknecht was offered a spot, but he refused, realizing that he would be held back by the non-revolutionary majority. And he was right to think that. Emil Barth, associated with the left wing of the independents, did not have the strength to do so. Linked with the so-called People's Commissars were expert advisors, who were usually members of the bourgeois parties, making sure the quote, socialists unquote, left untouched the state apparatus of the old empire. What this meant was shown within a few days when the ostensibly revolutionary government expelled the embassy of Russia. So, Friedrich Ebert was now Chancellor of the Reich and People's Commissar. He was now at the same time a leader of the revolutionary government and head of the old legal government. The right outmaneuvered the left on this decisive day. However, this defeat needs to be put in context. The right had more resources, a well-established party machine, and the imperial staff on their side. They had the support of the ruling classes both within and outside Germany. This is the challenge all socialist revolutionaries face. The revolutionary veneer of the counter-revolutionaries worked. They were able to fool the workers, for now at least. On the same day the so-called revolutionary government had formed, Marshal Hindenburg sent out a message that the decision has been made to collaborate with Chancellor Ebert to, quote, avert the spread of terrorist Bolshevism in Germany. This was the so-called Gröner-Ebert Pact. Years later, when Quartermaster General of the German Army, Wilhelm Gröner, had to defend himself against right-wing critics, he said, quote, the officer corps could only cooperate with the government which undertook the struggle against Bolshevism. Ebert had made up his mind on this. We made an alliance against Bolshevism. There existed no other party which had enough influence upon the masses to enable the re-establishment of a government power with the help of the army. The whole state apparatus remained thus intact. This is why Marx insisted in his writings about the Paris Commune that, quote, the precondition for every real people's revolution is not to transfer the bureaucratic military machine from one hand to another, but to smash it. The explanation of Social Democrat commentators that the MSPD was stuck in a dilemma and had no choice but to collaborate with the imperial forces is particularly funny. Already on the previous day, Ebert ordered all state officials to keep their posts. All personnel, including all the high functionaries of the imperial regime, remained in their positions. And, more importantly, the economic power of the bourgeoisie was left untouched. There were economic reforms that were promised, such as limiting the working day to 8 hours. However, those were necessary concessions to appease the striking workers in order to protect private property and undermine the Marxists' appeal. Only days later, representatives of the bourgeoisie signed a deal with the trade unions to form a so-called community of labor to accept some of the workers' demands. Brouet quotes one liberal commentator who would say that the agreement achieved one important thing, quote, it forms a strong bulwark against any attempt to overthrow our social system by violence. The German bourgeoisie used their capital, their media, their connections, and various other means to wage war against the revolutionaries, all with the help of the Social Democrats, of course. They created the Anti-Bolshevik Center with immense funding to print hundreds of thousands of leaflets, sometimes even calling for murder against the Spartakists and their Bolshevik terror, their chaos against the Jews and Bloody Rosa. They then formed the more powerful Anti-Bolshevik League, who would openly call for the murder of Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, and which had its own intelligence service, or as its founder would call it, a quote, active anti-communist counter-espionage organization. The funding for bourgeois media far overshadowed the funding for independent media, which was composed of the contributions of working people. Of course, the government agencies were dominated by counter-revolutionaries as well. Ebert appointed his son as the head of one such agency. The other important organ of class rule are the armed forces, and the High Command had still lots of it. They intended to use it against the armed workers. Because they feared a Bolshevization of Germany from the First General Congress of Workers' and Soldiers' Councils, which was to convene on December 16th, Ebert and General Gröner ordered troops to Berlin on the 15th to prevent this gathering and to regain control of the capital. Gröner told in a court years later that Ebert was in agreement with sending troops into Berlin to disarm the Spartakists. However, the discipline of their field army was breaking down. Many soldiers became swayed by the so-called Bolshevik agitators. Tired of the World War, they had enough of the military discipline. It wasn't clear to them what they were fighting for, and the coup attempt failed. Still, many were killed during that attempt, further radicalizing the workers of Berlin. Without the People's Army, the people have nothing, Mao Zedong famously said a few years later. The revolutionary left, of course.
Bro, you need to tell me what I need to be better than, instead of just, again, vaguely gesturing at vibes. It's very, very frustrating.
Understood this and called for the formation of a Red Guard, which was passed on November 12th by the executive branch of Berlin councils, but was dropped again after the pressure of the right wing. But there was one armed force the revolutionaries had, which was the security force that had been formed by Emil Eichhorn, who had seized the police headquarters in Berlin. With government forces leaving and Eichhorn controlling the police in Berlin, the ruling classes had to come up with something else. Using funding from big business, Prussian Social Democrat Minister of the Interior, Otto Wels, created the Republican Soldiers Corps. Among the corps recruiters was a man named Colin Ross, who was later a supporter of Hitler. They would soon clash with the revolutionaries, but they still weren't antagonistic enough. Yes, they were against the Spartakists, but many of them still wanted socialism and hated the old state. They would show themselves not reliable enough for Ebert and the High Command. A more vicious anti-communist right-wing force was needed. There were still thousands of soldiers who identified with the ruling class and the old state. On December 22nd, the Social Democrats in government agreed that Imperial General Georg Merker should organize a highly paid proto-fascist mercenary force called the Freikorps. The Freikorps, for those of you who don't know, were notorious for being connected to the Nazi Party some years later, with many of them joining the SA or SS. Many of the Nazi Party leaders were part of the Freikorps, such as Rudolf Höss or the later leader of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. It's almost funny when liberal commentators describe this period in German history as the time when the left irreparably split. I think it's fairly easy to argue that this was not a fight between the moderate left and the radical left. It was the right wing versus the left wing, capitalism versus socialism. The reactionary Freikorps were not fully ready yet to go in and murder communists. For now, the ruling class had to rely on these shaky government forces who were against the communists, but not with sufficient determination the ruling classes required. Those government forces were deployed on what people later called Ebert's Bloody Christmas. The People's Marine Division, who was stationed at the heart of Berlin's government buildings in the Imperial Palace, had been an issue of contention throughout the German Revolution. Like other sailors and soldiers, they too were at risk of joining the revolution. This was not something the government could afford, so they tried to disperse the sailors by withholding their pay. The sailors reacted by holding Social Democrat leader Otto Wels hostage on December 23rd until they received their pay. Ebert exploited this situation and ordered pro-government troops to storm the Schloss. However, many civilians sympathetic to the revolution joined the fight, and by midday, the sailors had won, with about 70 people killed. This was devastating for the Social Democrats, not only in terms of men lost, but now even the Social Democrat-dominated Berlin executive of the councils condemned the attack.
This is the fundamental problem, okay, with reformist versus revolutionary actions. Okay, when push comes to shove, do you side with fascists and the rest of the liberal capitalism defenders, or do you engage with the revolutionary trade unionists, socialists, and communists? No, there is no hatred for the Social Democrats. I'm not showing this to you to be like, yeah, this is why Social Democrats fucking suck. Okay? Because ultimately, the revolutionary wing also came from democratic socialism and social democracy. Like those who thought that they were engaging in reform in an honest way. Okay? And there are pivot points. There are, I guess, hinge points, to use the term that Matt Christman also has utilized. There are moments in time when things happen and there's like a supposed fissure. At least from the perspective, like this is a tiny microcosm of a much broader sentiment, a much broader historical moment. But there are points in time when people look at a situation and decide, no, actually, you know what? I do think that like American empire is better. I like what is going on. I don't want to resist. I want to resist change. I am fearful of change. I do not care as much about the many victims, the millions, the untold victims of our current neoliberal order. As long as I can get hamburger and PlayStation 5 at a, in a timely manner whenever I choose to consume such things. And many people, personally, many people choose order. And order, given the inherent contradictions that have to exist under capitalism, means order through force, order through fascism. L take. Okay. Well, I guess L take. What I don't understand is that the German masses went from being so pro-trade unions to socialists to short of fashion in such a short period of time. Suppression. Suppression, co-optation of socialism, unifying under a charismatic leader at a time of tremendous economic instability. All of this stuff is happening as a consequence of volatility. People's needs are not met. They're angry. The alternative is squashed, physically, violently squashed. And what remains is a co-opted, safe, docile, aesthetically progressive movement. Or I guess in that situation, socialist, aesthetically, in name only. Utilizing the popular sentiment of giving power back to the workers, you launch a campaign of fascism.
Attack. Power was slipping away. They did not even have the manpower to stop thousands of revolutionaries to seize the paper forwards on that day. Even worse, now the independents resigned from the government out of fear of losing support in Berlin, which was now more and more isolating the Social Democrats. It seemed like the revolution of November 9th and was close to seizing state power. But there was one problem. The Freikorps were ready, and they could exploit the great weakness of the revolutionary movement, its disorganization. On the 30th December of 1918, the Spartakists finally broke with the USPD and formed, together with the left radicals, the Communist Party of Germany. It was the first mass-based communist party outside the Soviet Union, and the Soviet leaders had great hopes for it. This was long overdue, according to Pierre Drouet. The revolutionary situation was highly developed, but had suffered a great lack of one coherent plan and organization, which a genuinely communist party can provide, as seen in Russia a year earlier, and soon in China and in many other places around the world. The Spartacus League was not powerful enough to provide a disciplined base to the quickly growing ranks of revolutionary soldiers and workers. A large section of the masses on the streets still mostly associated the USPD with a genuine socialist force. Most of them were not quite aware of the contradictory trends within that party. The constitution of the KPD was happening amidst a situation of great revolutionary confusion. One of the main obstacles in the party formation came from the International Communists, and specifically from Johann Knief, who was against uniting with the Spartakists because he hadn't forgotten how they didn't want to separate from the USPD. He believed the formation of a Bolshevik party was the right thing, but it shouldn't include Luxembourg and her supporters, who were alien to the Bolshevik spirit according to him. But the majority of the IKD decided for uniting with the Spartakists at a conference in mid-December. Within the Spartakists, there was also great disagreement about the party formation. Luxembourg and Jogichas were against forming an independent party at least until the next USPD Congress. But Luxembourg let herself be convinced by the international communist leader from the Soviet Union named Karl Radek, who carried the prestige of the October Revolution with him. After the independents rejected a call by Rosa Luxemburg for a
Bernie Sanders
special meeting following the Bloody Christmas, she had enough. And 112 delegates came together in Berlin to found the KPD in a 3-day conference over New Year's in the Festsaal of the Prussian Landtag in Berlin. 83 delegates came from the Spartacist League, and 29 from the International Communists of Germany. Karl Liebknecht held the opening speech with a hard tone. He criticized the, quote, mechanistic, unquote, conception which had guided the leadership until now, and condemned the, quote, failure to understand the supreme importance of mass action itself and overestimation of bureaucratic, parliamentary, and other activities. He continued, quote, we joined the USPD in order to drive forward through our efforts all those who could be driven, in order to make the best elements advance, and to unite them in order to win over the largest possible revolutionary forces, and to organize them in a single revolutionary proletarian party. It was a labor of Sisyphus. He called for an immediate break and the creation of a new party. Various names were discussed. Luxembourg wanted the name to be the Socialist Party, not the Communist Party, in order to salvage some spheres of unity between the parties of the Second International and the Bolsheviks. Her proposal was rejected. The name Communist Party of Germany, Spartacus, won out. Then Radek spoke and proclaimed, quote, German social democracy is dead. It was once the authority throughout the world. It now has no more authority. Then came the turn of Paul Levy, who would soon become the leader of the Communist Party after the murder of Luxembourg and Liebknecht, and he would speak about a topic that would become a major issue for the communists. He declared, quote, the road to the victory of the proletariat can pass only over the corpse of the National Assembly. However, shortly afterward he added, quote, despite all that, we propose to you that we do not stand aside from the elections to the National Assembly. Luxembourg agreed with Levy. None of the delegates were under the illusion that socialism can be brought about by parliamentary means, as those supposed socialists of the Second International thought. It was about whether it would be productive or counterproductive to use the National Assembly as a platform to break illusions among workers. The MSPD had called for a Constituent National Assembly to be convened as soon as possible, while the USPD and the Spartacus League wanted socialism based on the existing structure of workers' and soldiers' councils. So there was a sort of a dual power situation in Germany at the end of 1918, with the councils still having a far more powerful base. But Ebert's role as Chancellor of Germany and as a leader of the Council of People's Representative reflected how the old SPD reformist institutions had still great influence in both structures competing for power. The majority of the delegates were unimpressed by the arguments put forth by those who wanted to participate in the National Assembly. Only 6 days earlier, they had witnessed the humiliations of Ebert's government to crush the sailors in Berlin. Otto Rühle insisted, quote, we have other tribunes. The street is the great tribune that we have conquered and that we will not abandon, even if they shoot at us. Elections were an unnecessary distraction, he explained, saying the communists are done with, quote, compromises and opportunism. In the end, the Congress accepted Rühle's counter-proposal to not take part in the elections. Luxembourg's position tracked with Lenin's at the time, to use the parliament as a platform, not as a vehicle for real change. However, it surely didn't mean that Luxembourg was a proponent of bourgeois democracy as today's social democrats and Euro-communists like to paint her. Luxembourg's legacy is constantly being opportunistically revised and demarcated from, quote, authoritarian, unquote, communism in order to salvage liberal democratic institutions. In 1918, Rosa Luxemburg wrote about the National Assembly, quote, what is gained, then, with this cowardly detour called the National Assembly? The bourgeoisie's position is strengthened, the proletariat is weakened and confused by empty illusions. Time and energy are dissipated and lost in discussions between the wolf and the lamb. In a word, one plays into the hands of all those elements whose intent is to defraud.
Oh shit. Look what the cat dragged in, dude. No, it's not Murat. It's Mr. Show. He's saying, "Don't make fun of my pants." Let me see your pants. Oh, that's disgusting. Oh, you freak. He's wearing tights again. He's apologizing for wearing tights, but we know as a matter of fact his lies that he says he has nothing left. Yeah. Yeah. He's relapsed. He's wearing tights again. He's wearing his tighty whities again. Big time derail. Yeah, we're gonna pause it here. We're gonna pause it here because I'm gonna move on to the real revolution.